Communication. Communication is the key to success in any relationship. Whether you're conversing with your guests or your colleagues, if you use the basic principles of communication, you'll get the message across clearly. But good communication is not just about being heard, it's also about being aware of how you present the message. In this lesson, we'll be looking at the basic principles of good communication. The objective of this lesson is to ensure that you have a better understanding of how to communicate well with your colleagues and your guests. In particular, we'll be looking at body language, common mistakes and bad habits, and communicating with colleagues. Let's start by having a look at how body language affects communication. It is possible to say a lot to another person without actually speaking. You may think that this sounds a little strange, but what we're talking about is body language. Body language refers to the various ways people communicate with each other without actually talking. This includes posture, facial expressions, gestures, and eye movements. Let's have a look at some examples. Posture. Compare the posture of this waiter with this waiter. What message do you get? The first waiter looks quite bored, doesn't he? The second looks much more welcoming. Facial expressions. Have a look at these two waiters. The first waiter has a big smile on her face, which is welcoming and friendly. The second waiter is frowning. He really looks quite annoyed and unfriendly. Gestures. See how this waiter motions with his hand and nods his head as he stands aside for this guest to pass. He doesn't actually say anything, but with his hand gesture he says, "You go first," while he nods his head in a polite greeting. Eye movements. Making eye contact with your guest when they are speaking is a good way of showing that you are listening. By contrast, if you keep looking around at other things, it is extremely disconcerting and distracting for the guest. It's very important to be aware of the messages you are sending with your body language. Sometimes we forget and do something like standing with our arms crossed without realizing that we are making ourselves appear unapproachable. There are a couple of common mistakes and bad habits which a good waiter should always avoid. These are things like texting. Turn your phone off and forget your personal life while you're at work. Chewing on your fingernails or a pen. Imagine the guest's disgust if you present the bill with a revolting, chewed pen. Sneezing, coughing, or blowing your nose. Not only is this unhygienic, but in some cultures it is considered extremely rude to do this in any place where people are eating. Doing these things says to your guests that you are unprofessional and not interested in your job. Make a conscious effort never to do any of them. Now that we've had a look at some of the unspoken aspects of communication, let's talk about communicating with colleagues. Each establishment will have different systems in place to facilitate staff communication. In food and beverage service, there are 3 stages at which communication between team members needs to take place: before service, during service, and after service. Let's take a quick look at what sorts of information are relayed in each stage. Before service, in the pre-service meeting, guest information and information from kitchen and bar will be communicated to you. Your team leader may also discuss areas for improvement. During service, you will need to communicate with your colleagues. If they are nearby you, you can speak quietly without disturbing your guests. But what about when they are on the other side of the dining room? We can't just shout across the room, so we use hand signals to communicate instead. You need to learn the hand signals used at your establishment. You will also need to communicate with the kitchen and the bar. Always bear in mind that the kitchen and bar can be very busy, and these people need to focus on their work. Keep communication short and to the point in all areas. After service, we have a post-service meeting to discuss the highs and lows of service. Your team leader will give praise and criticism where appropriate. Communication is an extremely important aspect of service. This lesson will have provided you with a better understanding of the basics of good communication. To summarize, we looked at body language, common mistakes and bad habits, and communicating with colleagues. Learning to communicate well will not only improve the quality of service you can provide for your guests, it will also help you get ahead in many other areas of your life. Aim to learn as much as you can about communication and the systems in place at your establishment.